It was late at night in one of the tallest glass buildings in the city. Most of the offices were dark and the halls were quiet, except for the soft hum of vacuum cleaners and the occasional squeak of a mop bucket's wheels. The janitor moved from one floor to another, wiping down desks and emptying trash cans. He wasn't just working late, he was working 2 jobs. This was his second shift of the day, and every step he took was heavy with exhaustion. Still, he kept going, because he wasn't working for himself. He was working for his little girl waiting for him at home, asleep on her grandmother's couch. He moved carefully, not wanting to disturb anyone. But there was one light still on, even at this hour. The CEO's office. Everyone in the company knew about her. She was powerful, sharp, and intimidating. Most employees avoided eye contact with her, and no one dared enter her office without an invitation. She had a reputation for being cold, someone who didn't smile easily. But tonight, as the janitor walked past her open office door, he saw something unexpected. She was sitting at her desk, her face lit by the glow of her computer screen, looking tense and tired. Her hand rubbed her forehead as she spoke on a video call. Her voice was calm, but there was a slight shake in it, as though she was under pressure. The janitor paused for a second. He didn't want to eavesdrop, but he couldn't help noticing the stress on her face. He pushed his cleaning cart forward quietly, trying to move past. Then suddenly, her eyes landed on him. "You there," she said sharply, motioning him to step inside. He froze, unsure if he'd done something wrong. Slowly, he entered her office, standing awkwardly by the door. She glanced at the screen in front of her, then back at him, her eyes calculating, almost desperate. "Come here," she said softly this time. He obeyed, stopping a few steps away from her desk. On her screen was a man in a suit, an investor perhaps. His tone was confident, almost arrogant. The CEO's shoulders were stiff, her smile strained. "You said you had stability in your life, but I don't see that," the man on the screen said with a smirk. "You're always so focused on business. Do you even have a personal life?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then her gaze flicked to the janitor standing there. An idea formed in her mind. "Actually," she said with a sudden warmth in her voice, "I do." She reached out and lightly touched the janitor's arm, surprising him. "This is someone very close to me," she said, looking back at the camera. The investor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. The janitor blinked, unsure what was happening. He looked at the CEO, then at the camera, then back at her. His instinct told him to step back, to excuse himself, but she gave him a look, one that wasn't demanding but pleading. "Would you?" she whispered, her voice so soft only he could hear. "Pretend. Just for a few minutes." His heart raced. Pretend? Did she really just ask him to pretend they were together? He swallowed hard, glancing at the screen again. The investor's eyes were sharp, waiting for proof. The janitor didn't know what to do. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. He wasn't used to being in a room like this, expensive carpets, walls lined with awards, a CEO who probably earned more in a day than he made in months. And now she wanted him to act like he belonged here? She leaned closer, her voice firm but low. "Please, just trust me." He took a deep breath, nodding slightly. The CEO smiled, placing her hand gently over his. "See," she said sweetly to the man on the screen. "I do have someone in my life." The investor seemed surprised. "I see," he said slowly, clearing his throat. The janitor stood still, unsure what to do next. His heart was pounding, so loudly he was afraid the microphone would pick up. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. Then, instead of forcing a fake, awkward kiss, he did something else. Something that came naturally. He turned slightly toward her, leaned down, and pressed a soft kiss on her hand. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was simple, respectful, and calm. His eyes met hers briefly as he did it, and for a moment, the tension in the room shifted. She looked genuinely stunned. The investor blinked at the screen, adjusting his glasses. "Well, I didn't expect that," he said with a chuckle. "Seems I misjudged you." The CEO smiled faintly, the kind of smile no one in the office had ever seen. "Yes," she said smoothly, "you did." The conversation continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The investor seemed impressed, the deal was going smoothly, and the CEO carried herself with newfound confidence. Meanwhile, the janitor stood silently beside her, unsure what he'd just done, but hoping it was enough. When the call finally ended, she leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. For the first time, she looked at him not as an employee, but as a person. "You handled that well," she said softly, almost as if she was speaking to herself. He gave a small nod, still feeling out of place. "I just did what felt right," he said quietly. She studied him for a moment, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Thank you." He nodded again and turned to leave, his heart still racing. As he walked back into the quiet hallway, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that this was just the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. The janitor's shift ended at midnight, as always. But that night, walking home felt different. He couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. The CEO of the company, the woman everyone feared and respected, had asked him, a janitor, to help her in a moment of vulnerability. He didn't understand why she chose him. Maybe it was because he happened to walk by at the right time. Or maybe she trusted him in some strange way. He pulled his jacket tighter against the cold night air, his thoughts drifting to his daughter. She was the reason he worked so hard. He wanted to give her a life better than his own. The image of her sleeping face made his tired feet keep moving, even though every step ached. By the time he reached the small apartment he shared with his mother, his little girl was still curled up on the couch with her favorite stuffed toy, sleeping soundly. He kissed her forehead softly and whispered, "Daddy's home." The next morning, when he went back to work, things seemed normal. The office was buzzing with activity, employees rushing around, meetings happening behind glass walls. He pushed his cart through the hallway, hoping no one noticed him. He liked it that way, blending in, invisible. But today, he felt a little more on edge. What if someone had seen him in the CEO's office last night? What if there were rumors? As he turned a corner, he nearly bumped into one of the senior executives. "Watch it," the man snapped before walking away. The janitor muttered an apology and kept going, his head low. That's when he saw her. The CEO was walking toward him, her usual confident stride making people step aside as she passed. She was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, her hair neatly tied back, and her face calm, unreadable. The janitor froze, unsure if he should greet her. But to his surprise, she stopped in front of him. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Every employee nearby froze. The CEO didn't just speak to janitors. The janitor nodded nervously, following her down the hallway. They stepped into a quiet corner near her office, away from curious eyes. "Thank you for last night," she said sincerely. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. "I didn't do much. Just helped you out." Her lips curved into a small smile. "You did more than you realize." She paused, studying him. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't make it awkward. You just knew what to do." He shifted uncomfortably, unused to praise. "I just thought you needed help," he admitted. For a moment, she looked at him differently. Not as an employee, not as a janitor, but as a person. "Not many people would have done that," she said quietly. "Especially not for me." He didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. She took a step back, her professional demeanor returning. "I won't forget it," she said before turning and walking away, leaving him standing there, confused but oddly touched. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People whispered as he cleaned the offices, glancing at him like he was part of some secret they weren't in on. He pretended not to notice, focusing on his work. But deep down, he felt something had shifted. Later that evening, he went back to the break room to grab his lunch. He had packed a simple sandwich and an apple for his dinner. As he sat down at the small table, one of the younger employees walked in. "Hey," she said, "is it true you were in the CEO's office last night?" He froze mid-bite. "I was cleaning," he said cautiously. "Uh-huh," she said with a playful smirk. Sure. He didn't like the attention. He wasn't someone who liked being the center of gossip. But he let it slide, focusing on finishing his meal. That night, after everyone had gone home, he returned to cleaning the CEO's office. The room was quiet, the city lights reflecting off the glass windows. He carefully dusted her desk, avoiding her paperwork. As he turned to leave, he heard a soft voice behind him. "You're still here?" He turned to see her standing at the doorway, holding a cup of tea. "Yeah," he said, startled. "Just finishing up." She walked in, setting the cup on her desk. "Do you always work this late?" she asked, her tone gentle. He nodded. "2 jobs. Gotta make ends meet." Her expression softened. "For your daughter?" He blinked in surprise. "How do you?" "I overheard you talking on the phone once," she said simply. "You mentioned her." He looked away, embarrassed. "Yeah, she's everything." There was a pause. The CEO sat down at her desk, studying him. "You know," she said quietly, "people look at me and think I have everything. Power, money, control. But last night, I panicked. And you didn't." He looked at her, surprised. "You stayed calm," she continued. "You helped me, and you didn't ask for anything in return. That's rare." He didn't know what to say. Compliments weren't something he was used to. She glanced at him, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You're not like everyone else in this building," she said softly. He gave a small shrug. "I'm just me." For the first time, she let out a soft laugh. It wasn't mocking or sharp like he imagined. It was warm, genuine. "Maybe that's why you stood out," she said. The janitor felt something shift inside him. He wasn't sure what this was, a friendship? Respect? Something else? But for the first time in a long while, someone saw him. Really saw him. As he left her office that night, her words stayed with him. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The next few days in the office felt different. The janitor noticed it in small ways, the way people glanced at him, whispered when they thought he couldn't hear, and even moved out of his way when he pushed his cleaning cart through the hallways. Normally, no one noticed him. He was invisible, blending into the background. But now, it felt like every pair of eyes followed him. He tried to ignore it. He wasn't used to attention, and he didn't want trouble. He just wanted to do his job, go home to his daughter, and repeat it all the next day. But something had changed since that late-night moment in the CEO's office. On the third night after that strange encounter, he was once again cleaning the top floor. The office was quiet, the sound of his mop swishing across the polished floor echoing in the hallway. He reached the CEO's office and paused at the door, as he always did. She wasn't there tonight. The room was dark except for the city lights shining through the window. As he started dusting her desk, he noticed a small photo frame tucked behind a pile of papers. He had never seen it before. It was a picture of a young boy, smiling brightly, no older than 10. The frame was worn, like it had been carried around for years. He carefully set it back where it was, but the image stayed in his mind. There was something soft about it, something that made him wonder what kind of pain the CEO hid behind her powerful exterior. The next day, while emptying trash cans on a lower floor, he overheard 2 employees talking near the break room. "She's been in a better mood lately," one whispered. "Yeah," the other said with a laugh. "Maybe she's seeing someone." They both giggled as they poured coffee. He walked past them quietly, pretending not to hear. But the thought lingered. Was that what people thought? That she had someone in her life? Was that why she had asked for his help? That night, after his first shift at another job, he returned to the building. He expected another quiet evening, but when he reached the top floor, he found her there again. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the city lights. "You work too much," he said softly before he could stop himself. She turned, surprised, and for a moment he thought he'd overstepped. But instead of being angry, she smiled faintly. "And you don't." He chuckled under his breath. "Fair point." She gestured for him to come in. "Do you ever sit down?" she asked, nodding toward a chair. He hesitated, but eventually sat at the edge of one of the leather chairs across from her desk. He felt out of place, like he didn't belong in a room this expensive. "Why do you work 2 jobs?" she asked suddenly. He looked down at his hands. "For my daughter," he said simply. "She deserves more than this. More than I can give her right now." There was a long pause. She leaned back against her desk, arms folded. "You're a good father," she said softly. He looked up at her, surprised. No one had ever said that to him before. Trying, he murmured. Something in her eyes shifted. She sat down at her desk and leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You remind me of someone, she said. Who? My brother, she said after a pause. He used to take care of me when we were younger, always putting me first. He's gone now. He stayed quiet, sensing her pain. She sighed softly. I guess that's why she trailed off, then shook her head. Never mind. He didn't push her to continue. Instead, he just said he'd be proud of you. She looked at him, her expression softening. You don't even know me. He shrugged. I know what I see. You're strong. And people don't get that strong without surviving something. Her eyes glistened for a second, but she quickly blinked it away. She wasn't used to being seen like this. They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights casting a glow on the office walls. For the first time, the air between them didn't feel like CEO and employee. It felt like two people talking late at night, both carrying burdens no one else understood. Would you, she began hesitantly, would you sit with me for a while? He nodded, unsure why, but feeling like she needed it. So they sat there, she sipping her tea, him with his hands resting on his knees, both staring out at the glowing skyline. For a while, neither spoke. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. You know, I didn't mean to put you in that position the other night. I panicked. He shook his head. It's fine. You did what you had to do. No, she said firmly. You helped me. You didn't have to, but you did. And you handled it better than anyone else would have. He smiled faintly. Just seemed like you needed a hand. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. You're different, she said softly. Different. Most people in this building would have used that moment to get something from me. A promotion, a raise, a favor. But you didn't. He looked down, a little embarrassed. I don't want anything from you. Maybe that's why I feel like I can trust you, she said. Her words hung in the air. Trust. That wasn't something she gave out easily. That night, he left the office later than usual, but something felt lighter inside him. For the first time, the CEO wasn't just a powerful figure he cleaned up after. She was a person. And somehow, she seemed to see him too. He walked home through the cool night air, thinking about her words. Trust. Respect. Understanding. He didn't know what this connection was becoming, but he knew one thing for sure. Their worlds, as far apart as they seemed, were starting to overlap in ways neither of them had expected. And this was only the beginning. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet bond between the CEO and the janitor began to grow, though no one really understood it. To the outside world, they were two people who had nothing in common, a woman who owned the top floor and a man who cleaned it. But in those late-night hours, when most of the building was dark and empty, they shared a quiet understanding. It wasn't about words, not really. Sometimes they just sat in her office, the glow of the city lights pouring in from the floor-to-ceiling windows, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Other times, she would ask him questions about his life, about his daughter, about his dreams, and listen like no one else ever had. He was careful with his words, always respectful, always aware of the distance between their worlds. Yet she never once made him feel small. One evening, as he finished wiping down her desk, she spoke up suddenly. Do you know why I built this company? He looked up surprised. No, but I'd like to. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes soft but distant. I grew up poor. Very poor. My parents worked themselves to the bone, and still, we never had enough. I promised myself that one day I'd never have to worry about money again. I worked harder than anyone I knew, climbed every ladder, burned every bridge. And now, she gestured around the office with a bitter smile. Now I have it all. But some nights, it feels like I lost something along the way. He didn't interrupt. He knew she didn't need advice. She just needed someone to hear her. After a pause, he said gently, You didn't lose everything. You're still here. And you're not alone. She glanced at him, her expression softening. You're not what I expected, she admitted. He chuckled quietly. I'm just a janitor. No, she said firmly. You're more than that. You're a father, a man who works harder than anyone in this building. You treat people with kindness. That's more valuable than any title. His heart tightened at her words. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. A few nights later, something unexpected happened. He was cleaning the lobby when he overheard two employees laughing near the elevators. "Did you hear the rumor?" one whispered. "Apparently, the boss has a thing for the janitor." The other one snorted. "Please." She wouldn't look twice at him. "He's just a cleaner." The word stung, but he stayed quiet, pretending he hadn't heard. He was used to people looking down on him. Still, something about their laughter bothered him, not for his own sake, but for hers. He didn't want her to be mocked or judged because of him. That night, when he reached her office, she noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Nothing." She stood and walked closer, her sharp eyes scanning his face. "Don't lie to me." He hesitated, then finally told her about the employees' comments. He didn't name names. That wasn't his style. For a moment, she was silent, her jaw tight. Then she said, "Let them talk." He looked at her, surprised. "You don't care?" Her expression softened. "I stopped caring about gossip a long time ago. I've been called cold, heartless, too ambitious, none of it matters. What matters is what's real. And you're real." He felt a lump in his throat. "I just don't want to cause you trouble." She smiled faintly. "You're the first person who's made me feel like I'm more than my job. That's not trouble." From that night on, their conversations grew deeper. She began opening up about her past, about her brother, the boy in the photo he had seen. "He was my best friend," she said one night, her voice breaking slightly. "He always believed in me, even when no one else did. He died in an accident when I was 21. That's when I promised myself I'd make something of my life. But I never stopped missing him." He sat quietly, his heart aching for her. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She wiped her eyes and gave a small, sad smile. "I think that's why I feel comfortable around you. You remind me of him. You're steady, kind, honest." He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. She didn't need grand words, just someone to sit with her in her pain. One evening, after they had been talking for hours, she surprised him. "Would you bring your daughter here one day?" she asked gently. He blinked. "Why?" "I'd like to meet her," she said. "You talk about her all the time. I feel like I already know her." He hesitated. The idea of bringing his little girl to a place like this felt strange. This was a world of polished shoes, expensive suits, and marble floors, not a place for a child. But the warmth in her voice made him pause. "Maybe," he said quietly. She smiled, and for a moment, the cold, powerful CEO everyone feared was gone. In her place was just a woman, lonely, kind, and longing for connection. That night, as he left the building, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short time. He had never expected this job, this life, to bring him anything more than a paycheck. But somehow, he had become a friend to a woman who had everything money could buy, but nothing she truly needed: trust, kindness, and someone to listen. And though he didn't realize it yet, their bond was about to shift even more. Because soon, she wouldn't just see him as the man who cleaned her office. She'd see him as someone who changed her life. A week later, the building was buzzing with energy. The CEO had just closed one of the biggest deals in the company's history, and employees whispered about the upcoming celebration dinner. It wasn't every day that she invited her entire staff to a formal event. Most of them had only seen her in passing, walking through the halls with her sharp gaze and perfect composure. The janitor had no plans to attend, of course. Events like that weren't for people like him. He would be there to clean up after it ended, like always. Still, he felt a little proud, knowing he had played a tiny part in helping her land that deal. On the night of the event, the top floor of the building looked like something out of a movie. Elegant dresses, expensive suits, and glasses of sparkling champagne filled the air with chatter and laughter. The janitor worked quietly in the background, making sure everything was spotless. But as the evening went on, he noticed her searching the crowd. The CEO, in a simple but striking black dress, looked more like herself than he'd ever seen her. Her hair was down, her expression softer. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on him at the edge of the ballroom. "Come here," she mouthed. He froze. Surely, she didn't mean him. But she gestured again, and reluctantly, he put down his cleaning rag and walked over. The crowd seemed to notice. Conversations slowed. People whispered. The janitor could feel every pair of eyes on him. But she didn't care. She took his arm, surprising him. "Stay with me," she whispered. He hesitated. "I don't belong here." "You do," she said firmly. Before he could protest, she tapped her glass with a spoon, and the room fell silent. Everyone turned toward her as she stepped up to the small stage at the front of the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice calm but strong. "This company has reached new heights this year, and I'm proud of every single one of you. But tonight, I want to thank someone special." The janitor stiffened, realizing she was talking about him. She looked out over the crowd, her gaze soft. Sometimes success isn't just about numbers, deals, or profits. Sometimes it's about people, the ones who remind you of what truly matters. A week ago, I was in a moment of weakness. I felt pressured, cornered. And someone most of you don't even notice, stepped in and helped me. He showed me dignity, kindness, and strength when I needed it most. The entire room was silent. She turned and smiled at him. "This man." Gasps rippled through the crowd as every head turned toward the janitor. He stood frozen, unsure what to do. He isn't an executive. He isn't a manager. He's one of the hardest working people in this building. A man who works 2 jobs to take care of his little girl. A man who expects nothing, asks for nothing, but gives everything he has. And because of him, I closed the biggest deal of my career. Whispers filled the room. No one had ever seen her like this, so open, so raw. She turned back to him. "Would you come up here?" He swallowed hard, shaking his head. I don't." But she reached out her hand. "Please." With hesitant steps, he climbed onto the stage. She smiled warmly at him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You taught me something that night," she said softly, but loud enough for the room to hear. "You reminded me that respect and kindness are more powerful than money or titles. And I want to thank you, not just with words." She turned back to the crowd. "From this day forward, this man's daughter's education will be fully sponsored by me personally. She'll never have to worry about tuition, books, or opportunities. And she paused, smiling at him. "He will no longer be working 2 jobs. I'm offering him a position here, one that comes with fair pay and benefits. Because someone like him deserves so much more." The room erupted into applause. Some people looked shocked, others genuinely moved. But all eyes were on the janitor, who stood there, stunned, his eyes welling with tears. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. She leaned closer and whispered, "Say something." He cleared his throat, his voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I was only trying to help." "And you did," she said softly, smiling at him. He looked out over the crowd, all the faces staring at him, and then back at her. "Sometimes, kindness is all we have to give," he said quietly. "But tonight, you've shown me how powerful it really is. Thank you." The room went quiet again. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then, the applause started once more, louder this time. People stood, clapping and cheering. The janitor's heart felt heavy, full, and overwhelmed all at once. He never wanted recognition. He never wanted a reward. But now, standing next to her, he realized this wasn't about him. It was about what they had shown everyone, that humanity mattered. As the applause faded, she leaned close and whispered, "You changed my life that night. Let me change yours." He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude, and nodded. That night, as he walked home, the world felt lighter. He carried no paycheck in his pocket, no riches or treasures, but something far more valuable: dignity, respect, and hope for a better future for his daughter. And for the CEO, it was the first night in years that she felt truly human, because a simple act of kindness had shattered the walls around her heart.